Okay. Now we're on. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
I was getting a little. I think the internet could already hear us. So if you're on the internet and you could already hear us, just enjoy the fact that sometimes technical difficulties make for comedy. Anyway, thanks to all and those who you don't have to leave. You can stay in the room if you want to, but if you feel like you have to carry your conversation somewhere else, that's fine. Welcome to week 6. I can tell you're excited.
I'm also excited about this class. It's like going back to Israel, and that's what we're trying to do is get you very familiar with Israel. Hope sometime you will go. Stan's planning to go with Cheryl and help host the trip. And very frankly, I didn't want to go the first time. I think I may have said this before. I actually was a little afraid to go, to tell you the truth. And even though I'd gotten my doctorate at the Jewish University in Cincinnati and had an archaeological school in Jerusalem, which they do have on King David Street, I just was a little bit nervous about going, and I got kind of hooked into going. I spoke at a congregation for several weeks, and they were planning on me taking a large group from there, and I didn't know that. And the war intervened, the first Gulf War, and so I remember they asked me to come back a year later and do another 3 months. I did 6 months on Israel and archaeology, and so I noticed a funny thing happened that when they gave me, I never tell a congregation what, they'll ask me, how much you want to come? I said, you give me whatever you want to give me. And I just noticed that the check was, I think it was like $50, $75 more than it was the year before for the same. I said, why? They said, well, you don't understand. Last year, we didn't pay you very much money, but a trip to Israel was involved. And the trip to Israel was all taken care of, so that's why. So I went, and then I got hooked. So we're trying to get, everyone who's been, many people this congregation's been, everyone who's been gets excited.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we just dive right in and we'll pray at the end, because we got started a couple of minutes behind with Mother's Day transitions or whatever. So why don't you take us through this?
Okay, we showed you, several maps, and what we're doing right now is we landed after we gave you a couple of introductions. Then we started kind of systematically going through. You land at Tel Aviv, which is very close to Joppa, and usually you save Joppa for the end. And in my 22 trips, about 19 or 20 of them, we went directly north. And that's what we usually do. And so we got you up into Galilee, and so we're hoping to spend about another week in Galilee before we head down the Jordan Valley. But a lot of those places you see we have now talked about, but our first stop is almost always Caesarea. It's called Caesarea Maritima. We're going to talk about a Caesarea Philippi today. And then we work our way up to Mount Carmel or over to Megiddo, and then start going in. And if you remember, we went to Cephas, which is just north of Nazareth. We're kind of holding Nazareth back for a discussion later. And we ended up last week working our way after Mount Tabor. We worked our way to the Sea of Galilee and stay all night in Tiberias. We usually spend about 3 nights in Tiberias, sometimes four depending on the length of the trip. So we're going to make our move right here. As once you get situated in Tiberias, we know that one day is going to be spent going to all the cities around Tiberias. We're going to spend some day on the lake, and we're going to eat at one of the fish places on the lake. But one of the days, usually the first day we're there, we head north. And as I should have showed you on that map, it's just a few miles north of the Sea of Galilee, is the city of Chorazin. Jesus cursed the city of Chorazin, and that's where Stan took us to a minute ago. This is was taken from the bus uh, as you ride on the hillside, or it could have been, this may be an aerial view, a little high there. But one of the things you see north of the Sea of Galilee is basalt, a lot of basalt rocks. And here is a whole town built out of basalt. And Jesus cursed this place called Chorazin. And so we're going to take you through Chorazin in just a minute. You see the ruins there are rather magnificent. We can't go to every place in Israel. I think I've been to Chorazin maybe 7 times. And, but you can see the ruins are immense here. There are some very unique things. This is just looking back toward the Sea of Galilee. That's the northern part of the sea. And just building after building is there. And the most spectacular thing is the synagogue. So here is what's left of the synagogue. And inside the synagogue, there is something very unique, and that is the seat of Moses is inside here. And Jesus, talks about people who sat on the seat of Moses, and this was the authoritative place for a lot of the teachers. So,
yeah, I would just jump in real quickly
Sure.
here. So what we did, this previous picture that we went by, that's it, and that was in some of the photos that Dr. Cloud had sent. And what we're excited about this morning is we spent a lot of time this weekend, actually. We talked on Friday and on Saturday. And we've got more information probably this morning than just what you're accustomed to in this class with pictures and whatnot, because we're getting now to the reason you go over there. Yes, some of you who have been, yes, some of the statements we have set up here about just being there, feeling it, seeing it, smelling it, being involved with all of your senses in that part of the world would do Bible study wonders anyway, even if that's all there was. But things like the seat of Moses and other things we're going to be talking about today are directly out of Scripture and oftentimes cause people questions of what in the world was that? What could that be? Because we're so distanced from it that until we see it or until we have cultural connections to things, we're not really totally clear on what all Scripture has included in it that we can't understand, because we're in a different place on the globe, we're in a different culture, we see things from a Christian perspective post the cross. There's all manner of things that happen that are actually there in the Scriptures that we just don't pick up on until we have something like this and we have it explained and we see it and we understand that what Jesus was saying here was, yes, you Pharisaical leaders in Matthew, you do have the lineage to track to Moses' seat where he sat. And then he comes back and tells them later, though, however, down you see the text at the bottom from Mark, however, some of the things you've misinterpreted or misunderstood, just because you have lineage to the seat of Moses doesn't mean that you're correct. And so that, I think, is important for people to understand what that is and that it was a real thing and that we have found it.
Right, and we're on the same level as Jesus is here. All this in Galilee, this is where he walked. When you're in Jerusalem, you might be 15, 20 feet above where he walked because of the building and tearing down and rebuilding. But you're there, the Chorazin. This was actually the city of Chorazin.
So another one, mikvahs. Talk to us about that. We've heard that word in sermons and lessons.
Yeah, it's, again, a ritual bath, and you find these all over the land. We didn't, for some reason, didn't have a lot of them in the video the slides last week about Cephas, but there are a ton of them in Cephas. I don't know why I didn't have a shot there. And Stan found this. It gives you a little idea of the ritual bath. This was very, very important to the Jews.
Yeah, what's fascinating is that they're stepped baths. That's what's there in point number 2, that people just kind of got in line and walked down into them and then walked back out of them and went to the other side, and the process was done almost like you're waiting in line to get into the temple. And so you just cleansed yourself and then went in. And that was so common. We think of, even as Les mentioned this morning, being 11 or 12 years old and being baptized and then thinking, well, I did that one time. That is different than the way they thought of it. They purified themselves, well, as often as they went, right?
Right. And so we're going to go north from Chorazin and work our way to Caesarea Philippi, to the Golan Heights, and
Yeah, just the oil press you had in one of the slides.
and there will be, when we get down to near the end of the trip, we'll be at a place called Lachish and Marashah, another place in the Bible that people never have heard of, but it's there. And we'll show you some oil presses that are really very nice. Of course, they're continually finding coins that have the names of rulers, different Caesar, the governors, just different people there. And again, we try to give you as many views of Galilee as we can. And I mean, maps of everything, so you kind of get a feel for it. You know where Syria is today because of all the trouble that goes on in Syria and Lebanon. But when Herod the Great died, his kingdom was divided among a lot of key people, and two of those people were Herod Antipas, who ruled Galilee and a couple of other parts, but especially Galilee and part of Decapolis, and Herod Philip, and the city Caesarea Philippi has his name in it, and later Agrippa becomes the king. Agrippa 1 and 2 become the rulers there. So a lot of stuff is in your Bible.
Yeah, and this morning what was exciting was we had no idea when we put this together that Les would use Matthew 16:16 in the sermon this morning and talk about the Son of God the way he did, with it might not mean to the apostles when they first said it or heard it what we think it does. And I sat there and I thought, wow, this is going to just dovetail perfectly with what Dr. Cloud and I are talking about, because when we get to Caesarea Philippi, which is where we're getting ready to go into now, you see the scriptures there on the left of the screen. There's only two places that Caesarea Philippi is actually mentioned. And in both cases, Jesus asked the apostles, who do people say that I am? And then after they answer that, and you're probably familiar, they say various things. Some people say you're Elijah. Some people say that you're, whatever. And then he asks a second question. He says, well, who do you say that I am? And that's when Peter makes the declaration that he is the Son of the living God. And Jesus tells him that was provided to Peter from his Father. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known to say that. And so we know that pretty well. I think what's great about archaeology and the Holy Land trip is that when we look at where that occurred, we can stop and think, okay, I know the scriptures. I just paraphrased them pretty closely there, and I saw several of you nodding, exactly what I was saying. But when we stop and we actually look at this and look at where it is and what's going on in that time in the world, and really before the cross changes everything, we find a lot more information than probably we've realized. If you look there where the arrow is pointing, Caesarea Philippi in parenthesis is under the word Banus, which Dr. Cloud's going to talk to us about here in a little bit. And then on another map in a minute, we're going to see a different name for the city. It went by many different names, which towards the end, towards Jesus' days, it was going more by the names of the kings, of the rulers, of the Caesars, than the previous names, like we see here with Banias. Mount Hermon there is up to the top, and Dan is the city to the left. And you see the tributaries there coming in, the four forks there leading into what becomes the Jordan River. All of that's going to be important when we look at the text here. So in Matthew 16 that we heard part of this morning, verses really 13 through 16, you get the different city names there. It tells you where it was. It tells you the Banias and Caesarea Philippi and Caesarea Panias and Neronius, which is actually off of Nero, who became Caesar at the end, the one that was so anti-Christians, and probably is the reason that Paul and others were put to death. And then that second paragraph tells you where it's located, which we just looked at on the map. And then in the Old Testament, you see where some of these other names are located, like in Joshua and in Judges and First Chronicles. You have towns like Baal Gad and Baal Hermon. And we know Baal is the other gods, the contest we've already talked about on Mount Carmel. We know that's the other deities that people in the Old Testament would worship. And then we see those city names. Well, those city names were kind of known as the twin cities, or the gates to the underworld. That's where Sheol was thought to be accessed. And then this has more information here about the Jordan River and a source for the Jordan River. And then it gets into some Greek mythology. You got to go back to your high school class and remember Pan, the little guy who was like half goat, half human, and had the goat legs and had the flute and did whatever. Well, it was thought that in Greek mythology and Greek gods that Pan was located here in Caesarea Philippi, and actually there was a temple that was made to Augustus, and there was worship of Pan that was going on there. And all this, as you can see on the screen in different footnotes there, is from Josephus and his information. So we'll show you where this picture came from in a minute. It's actually a display that's over there, but here's what it might have looked like. And you see the temples, and you see the different structures there and all the people that are participating. And if you look, now I've been told online you can't see the laser pointer, so I apologize for that. It's probably a refresh rate thing. But for those in the room, if you look over here on the left, you see this big opening, this black like cave opening over here behind this building that's on both screens there. And as we go forward, it tells us that this is the Temple of Pan. This is where people would go to perform worship services and it's believed sacrifices there too. And all of this stuff that we've looked at so far, from Mount Hermon down to the lakes, is all in this area called Bashan, or Bashan, or Bashan, I guess is probably the proper way to pronounce it. And we know of Bashan from Amos in the Old Testament, but watch this. Bashan is a region situated in the upper Transjordan, and its borders include Mount Hermon and the Sea of Galilee and the Yarmouk River, which we'll see here in a minute as well. And so we're right spot in the area that we're looking at, right? All of this stuff we've been talking about, Caesarea Philippi is what it's called now, but it's right there in Bashan. And the cities located in Bashan include Ashtaroth, there from Deuteronomy and Joshua, and Salika from Deuteronomy, and Edrei, which is one that comes from another language, which we'll explain here in a minute. But what's really, really interesting here is that Bashan, we've heard when Amos tells the high pious people in the book of Amos, when they don't understand worship, he calls some of the women cows of Bashan. Remember that? And people might say, why would he say that? Well, because they're not worshiping Yahweh correctly. They're not actually living out what God called them to do with mercy and justice and those verses that we know from Amos. But here's what I really put it in here for. The cows are to remind you of Amos and that statement. But the Ugaritic language and those two city names again, Ashtaroth and Edrei, they weren't actually spelled that way with Bashan, that area. It was actually spelled Beitan, which would be more in line with a linguistic connection to a word that we would translate serpent. And so where have we heard serpent? We've heard serpent, obviously, from Genesis 3. That was the being that was in the garden. So the serpent became Lord of the dead after his rebellion in Eden. Remember, he was cast down and he was cursed and he was put below the earth, and he basically became the Lord of the dead. And the gates of hell, or the gates of Hades, which would be more appropriately listed there, would be those two twin cities that are kind of funneling you towards this Bashan area, which is also known as the serpent. So if we take all that into account and we actually think about what was going on there that we have evidence of, we have these worship services that were going on to fertility goddesses, and they were worshiping Baal, and they were offering even human sacrifices. We have war history there, where during the wars the Jews were sacrificed when they were conquered. They were just slaughtered at this place. There's a whole lot going on in this area that when we just read Matthew 16, unless we know all of this, we don't see all of the story jumping off the page. Another quick reference to the Old Testament is Og, king of Bashan, when he was taken, and that city being listed then, that's now listed now, that's possibly the modern name there at the bottom. But the point being is, the gods in the Holy Land on the trips will inform you that human beings were sacrificed at this spot to Zeus, Pan, and other gods, and now you know why, because of what we've just gone through. And you see that alcove there. There's several of them in this picture. And then you see the gate hole that's kind of in the back with what's called a grotto in it with a spring. And it's unbelievable that that spring is actually where the water originates to become the headwaters of the Jordan River, where Jesus was baptized. And so all of a sudden, if you're not getting chill bumps yet, you probably will here in a few more minutes, because what's happening is every single thing that there's the spring water that feeding the Jordan River, there's the waterfalls. And before I go back to that, you said it's not always that lush, right? It's not always that flowing with water.
Yeah, it's not as full. Here's a shot. It's really full. Let me just say a word, and then I want to let you come back and explain the gates of hell. So we're in an area here that is very lush, no doubt about that. But we're an area of Bashan, and north of that, the Golan Heights. In the Bible, it's just called Golan. If you go back to the book of Judges and see the land divided up, you'll see it'll talk about Bashan and Golan, which now is called Golan Heights. And we got some great pictures of that in a minute. And then Mount Hermon's right above that. Well, Hermon the snow feeds the city of Dan, we saw a couple of weeks ago. It feeds, these are the Hermon Springs. So just a few miles apart, Dan and Caesarea Philippi are being fed, and a third branch comes out of Lebanon, and those three branches come together. Next week, we have a complete set of following the Jordan all the way from the top, beautiful pictures, all the way down to the Dead Sea. Remember the old days when you go to the movies and they'd stop near the end with somebody on a cliff, and you didn't get to see till next week. Well, that's what we're telling you here. Next week, you're going to see a whole shot of the Jordan. So here is this place, as Dan said, many names, but most people come to know it in New Testament studies as Caesarea Philippi, the area there. But it was called after the god Pan, and so, but Arabs can't say Pan. So not only do you see Panias, like Tiberias, that IAS just indicates a city. So Panias means this is a city where they worship the god Pan. You saw the name Banias. That's because an Arab can't say a P. He comes out of B. So Banias. So you see Banias on some maps. You see Panias on some maps. And I'll never forget, I was trying to explain this over in Jordan as we crossed the north one year, and we were coming down through Jordan, and they were having a hard time, the people on the trip with us, of why the B and the P. And I said, just listen to the guide. And so we came to this place, and someone said, "Oh, what's that building right way over there across that parking lot?" He said, "Oh, the building across the barking lot is such and such." And so that's so when you see Panias and Banias, we don't want to bury you with linguistics and all these things, but we may be. We're trying not to. But the basic deal was here was a really highly pagan place, and this is the place where Peter asked Jesus the question.
And here's why it's important. When we look at these remnants or rubble here, it might have looked something like that in the time of the Caesars, and then around the first century. So you can see back there at the back, there's like this bridge-looking thing, structure, and then another temple. But here's where we're trying to distill all this down. So you don't have to, if you don't hear anything else from all the different names of the cities and all the references of the Old Testament and whatnot, here's why Dr. Cloud and I think this is important. This is another picture that we looked at earlier, but we've got some information down the right-hand side. On the temple on the far left was called the Augustus Temple, and then you have the grotto cave behind it that we looked at with the water, and then you have that is known as the cave of the god Pan, and it's behind that temple. And then you have the court of Pan and the nymphs to the right of the temple, and you have the temple of Zeus in the middle, and then you had the court of the Nemesis to the right of the temple of Zeus. So that's what all that worship area structure all was that we just looked at that now looks like that. So we see from archaeology that these things aren't made up, that they're real, that those structures were there. And then we see a sign like this that I haven't personally seen, but I'm sure you have, where there's that picture that someone zeroed in for us so that we could show you what it looks like. And there's both in Hebrew and English the descriptions of what we just went through. And then we look at what happens in Jesus' day. So if I can set this up this way, while I'm trying to spend a little time here with this, differently than what we've done in some of our other classes. In the Old Testament, it was everything being performed there was being performed in opposition to Yahweh. It was the other gods. We know, without getting into a whole lot of discussion here this morning, that there were things that can't be explained that were going on because we know that the world was different prior to the cross than after the cross. The powers hadn't been defeated. Jesus hadn't had all authority transferred to him yet. People were possessed. We saw that in the New Testament. There's all kinds of things going on, right? And this was the hub of that. Well, then you add in the New Testament, you add the fact that this picture is showing you in Greek there that these little alcoves that I showed you a while ago was where they would put the bust of one of the Caesars, one of the people that they called Son of God, like Les was talking about this morning. And they referred to Augustus or to Herod or to Antonius or whoever it is. They referred to them as the Son of God, not Yahweh, but the Son of God in the term they meant, which was almost like they're deified, almost like they're partly beyond human. And the inscription there at the bottom tells you that. Herod adorned this place with what was really already a very remarkable one from the Old Testament history, still further by the erection of his temple, which is dedicated to Caesar. And then Victor, a priest, there at the bottom is what that translation of that Greek text is saying. So there were priests to the humans that were Caesars that were considered God or deity, right? So all of that is going on in this same area. And then you have that hole that was back there behind those temples, the gates of Hades, or the wow.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That was perfect timing. Or the opening to Sheol, right? The underworld, where the dead would go. Like if you think back to the book of Samuel, where Saul goes to the witch of Endor, and they call Samuel up. He comes from somewhere. So the cultural thought was this is the access to where those spirits and those people are. Okay. And so it's important because when Jesus says this in Matthew 16:18, he's not only saying that he stands against the powers of darkness at this place. He's actually saying that he's baptized in the waters that flow from it, and he's setting himself apart to accomplish the mission of reversing Mount Hermon. Okay, now we don't have time to go into that, but the thought at the time was, and I know that last week we looked at Mount Tabor maybe being where the Transfiguration was. But the other theory is that it's at the top of Mount Hermon, because Mount Hermon was seen as where all of this stuff originated from, as Dr. Cloud said a while ago. And so Jesus is going to reverse that curse. He's going to reverse everything that this whole culture understands, and Jesus is truly Lord of lords and King of kings. So when he says Jesus is king, that offends everybody who says Caesar is Lord or Caesar is king. So hopefully that's making sense. And then it gets even more pointed. The kingdom of God is actually the aggressor. The first time I saw this, it just changed that scripture for me completely. If we think about what Les went through in the sermon this morning and the way he described the good news, this is your God, this is your God, and they finally got it. This is God himself in human configuration here. Well, once we see that, then this text takes almost a 180-degree flip. Instead of the way in my lifetime and in my childhood I was left with the impression that what this meant was, well, I sure hope that the church can withstand hell, because the gates of hell hopefully won't be able, to see, the way I learned it was that the gates of hell will not prevail against it, as if it is the church. Like hell's coming after the church, and hopefully the church can stand strong enough that the gates of hell won't conquer it. But it's the other way around. It's not the gates of hell attacking the church. It's the church and Jesus attacking everything that was. It's the church being so strong that Hades can't hold the people that are his. He can pull them out. And so It's the gates of Hades that are under attack, not the church. They will not hold up against the church. Hell has no claim on those who align themselves with Jesus. He will reverse the curse of death and Hades itself, which is all represented right here in this place. Everything from anti-Yahweh to anti-church to anti-Christians to anti-Jesus, this is the physical place that everybody pointed at as the nucleus of that. And Jesus says right then and there, I'll build my church right here and reverse it all. So all those arguments about whether he was saying that Peter was the human being the church was built on, or whether he was saying that it wasn't that. It was that everything that's anti-God and church and Christianity and Jesus and the kingdom originates from right here, and right here is where he's going to put his church and reverse it. So hopefully that helps. If we didn't have all of the archaeology, we didn't see these pictures, and we didn't understand all of this mythology and all this stuff behind it, we'd never probably reinterpret that verse that way. So if you're not as excited as I am, you don't have to be, but I'm very excited about it because that seems much more contiguous with Jesus is God himself, and what could be more powerful than God? And the answer is nothing. And so if he started his church, then all of this that has been powerful before is not. And that's when we see Jesus casting out demons and doing the things he does in the New Testament.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. And what you saw a while ago, the reconstruction drawing, right below that is where the waters or where the spring of Hermon is coming out. And when you go to this picture, you can actually see there's Dan is in there, Caesarea Philippi, but this was an unbelievably pagan area. And this is where the capital, when Herod Agrippa II became the king of Israel, and Herod Antipas sent into exile, this was the heart of the kingdom up there.
I'm so glad you said that. We try not to just read the slides to you. One of the slides, or several of them, said City of the Gods at the top, and that's why we think Jesus asked them the question he asked them at that location. Who do you say that I am? Because they're in the midst of all these other godly beings, supposedly, or the place that's there. And then they answer who he is, and of course that's the correct answer when Peter answers it. So you connected the dots for us on that. So there's just another map with Mount Hermon, Caesarea Philippi, and Dan, and then down to where we started, right there above the Sea of Galilee. And so, as I alluded to a second ago, this is the other place that most people think might be the site for the Transfiguration, because it would make sense that it's on the mountain that is the source of all that we've talked about. We're not going to be dogmatic about it. We're not going to say it has to be. It's so high at 9,200 feet that we don't know of a church or chapel that was built up there. But there's another theory there. As far as the Jordan River that we're doing the cliffhanger on, do you want to take them through? You asked me to put this in there for the tributaries, and the names on the right are modern names, and the names on the left are biblical ancient names.
Yeah, and like I say, the very first thing you'll see next week is a tour down the Jordan River, but three main branches, but two of them, we usually go to two of them. We go to Dan. You guys, that I see several of you here, went to Dan, I'm sure. We don't always go to Caesarea Philippi. We try to, but usually we just go to the cave and the water. And actually across the street is actually the capital city. My good friend John Willis taught at Abilene, taught at Lipscomb with me, actually excavated there. So these are all the tributaries, but there are three main ones. One coming out of Lebanon, and two in the Golan Heights there with. And so here was
Golan Heights.
Yeah, if you remember, if you went on the trip, we drove to the border where the United Nations buildings are, the white buildings. And standing there, you're 25, maybe 30 miles at the most from downtown Damascus is where you are. And here again, the Golan Heights are very, very hilly. And the reason that Israel took these over is because the people in Syria were shelling them from the Golan Heights. Only one time have we actually stopped at Nimrod's castle. We always point it out on top of the hill, but this is Nimrod's castle there in the Golan Heights.
Yeah, I deleted the Nimrod slide from Tiglath-Pileser,
Okay.
but I figured you'd go into it if you want.
All right, that's fine. And anyway, like I say, we've been up there one time, and the college students with us went down underneath and the dungeons and all that kind of stuff. But here again, it shows you what a beautiful area it is. And this is partly occupied Syria and partly Israel's part in the Golan Heights. This was a kind of a crazy map turned sideways, but we're just again trying to give you a picture, a little bit of a picture.
Yeah, neither one of us like this map. Number one is the body of water there for the Sea of Galilee is perpendicular to the way it should be. If you think about the drawing, the river comes down, and that shape of the body of water kind of makes a teardrop in line with the river. And on this map, it's turned perpendicular to the Jordan River, so we didn't understand that. But what we left it in there for, there is a redeeming quality. It was meant to show topography of how low the Sea of Galilee is at negative 212 compared to how high Mount Hermon and the Golan Heights area is, so that everything's kind of like, well, I guess kind of like here in Nashville. It's kind of like a basin, like a bowl, like everything's going down to that area. Right?
And that's meters too.
Yes.
672 feet English of it for Americans below sea level there. And you can see the Golan Heights, and as Stan told you, Mount Hermon, 9,200 feet high. So it's quite a little trip there.
And there's another shot of Mount Hermon with the snow. Just impressive area. And what you liked this one? Tell them about this. You just like horses, or you just like the colors, or?
It's just it gives you a real feel for going through the Golan Heights. There are a lot of plush areas there and all, and it's an area where, like Bashan was known for having fat cows, and that's what Amos is doing. He's calling the noble women in the north. Remember, Amos is a southern prophet who comes up to Bethel and blasts the people in the north before he blasts Israel, but he blasts Judah also. And he says, you know, these women, he calls them fat cows of Bashan. That's what he's really calling them. You're pampered. You just sit around eating, gaining weight, blah, blah, blah. So that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, and that's actually our last slide. What we hope we're doing is connecting dots. I mean, when you hear these things like Bashan, Mount Hermon, gates of Hades, you see where Jesus asked questions, you hear where the answer was, you understand now why that question would have been so, I guess, shocking in that particular area. You see that in the name Caesarea Philippi, it looks like it says Caesar. How would I do that? Caesarea? Caesar.
Yeah, it's Caesar based on, they named people like Herod named everybody after Augustus Caesar. And then later monarchs named people after Tiberius Caesar. So they got Caesar's name in there.
Yeah, and so it becomes Caesarea Philippi.
And then Herod Philip, so he got his name in there also. He's the one that Herod left it to. Herod the Great left it to.
And we took it out. We were afraid we were going to have too much history or points and not enough pictures, but it changed its name all these different times. Banius, Panius. It even went to Neronius for Nero, and then in AD 68, when Nero died, they said, you know what, this Neronius thing doesn't make any sense. Let's flip it back to Caesarea Philippi again. But today it's actually known as what?
Today, usually it's called Banius.
Banius.
The area is called Banius. So what we're doing next week, preview of coming attractions, we will start at the top of the river and show you the two main rivers, the one at Dan, called the Laish Stream and the Dan Stream, that some of you haven't seen if you're home, because that was the Sunday that it didn't come through.
Yeah,
so we'll show you those, and then we'll take you downriver and show you what happens all the way down the Jordan River to the Dead Sea.
Yeah. So we're going to be done about 4 minutes early on Mother's Day, if that's okay with you, or if someone has a question.
Yeah,
we realized we didn't stop usually and ask for questions, but if you have a question and you're just dying to ask, now would be the time.
My question is, where's Curtis?
He brought Mrs. Curtis. His wife was here with him this morning. I talked to him right after worship, and they were right over here, and I'm guessing maybe Isn't today a crazy day for restaurant lines? I mean, if some of the reasons some of these seats are empty are probably people are out standing in line to get a table for Mother's Day, I guess. But.
So if we didn't give you enough pictures today, we're going to give you some next week. And also at the very beginning, probably what we'll do is we took some things out. The city of Caesarea Philippi, when tourists go, they don't get to see the city of Caesarea Philippi. They see that part of it, the one by the cave of Pan and where the springs of Hermon start and the river starts there. But I went 21 times, and it was closed every time. And I knew that John, my friend, had been digging over there. So I said to Ami, our main guide, I'd really like to go inside there. So we got there, and we looked at things, and we got ready to get on the bus, and it was closed again. And he saw how disappointed I was, so he said, everybody just stand by. I had 87 people, And he goes over and probably paid him something, had a negotiation with the caretaker. And the man opened it up for us, and we were able to go into Caesarea actually for the first time. And so we'll show you some shots from that next week.
Good deal. That's exciting. That's like a VIP tour.
I'm sorry?
It's like a VIP tour that you got from, from
right.
Mommy.
We did. It was more astounding than I thought. The ruins were greater than I thought, and very few people get to see those ruins.
Well, we'll get it put together and see you next week. Happy Mother's Day, and have